Hey, unless you've been off the grid this weekend, you've probably heard about this story. Brian Kilmeade is a co-host of a Fox News morning show. I think it's called Fox and Friends. And in this segment from a few days ago, they were bantering back and forth about what to do with the unhoused population of Washington, D.C. And his co-host suggested, well, just locking them up in prisons. Brian Kilmeade one-upped him with the following suggestion.
They have given billions of dollars to mental health and the homeless population. A lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, Brian.
Or involuntary lethal injection. Just kill them. Now, he said that, and the two co-hosts didn't reply in real time that maybe that's a bad idea. And the conversation just went on. And for some reason, it took a couple days to go viral, but that did go viral on Sunday. And Kilmeade then offered an apology.
We were discussing the murder of Irina Zaruska in Charlotte, North Carolina, and how to stop these kinds of attacks by homeless, mentally ill assailants, including institutionalizing or jailing such people so they cannot attack again. Now, during that discussion, I wrongly said they should get lethal injections. I apologize for that extremely callous remark. I'm obviously aware that not all mentally ill homeless people act as the perpetrator did in North Carolina, and that so many homeless people deserve our empathy and compassion. In the morning, we were...
Okay, that's the apology that he posted. He says, I'm sorry, I'm aware that not all homeless people should be euthanized. Okay, so what should we think about that? The interesting thing that, and this is why I'm commenting on this, to be honest, is because of the way that people have responded to Brian Kilmeade. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And the way that they've responded is by praising his apology, even bordering on effusive praise. And I'm not just talking about Fox people, I'm talking about very strong critics of Fox News and of Brian Kilmeade. I'm just going to give you one example. So this was just one example, a tweet from Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol is a conservative from the Bulwark, which means he is one of the strongest critics of Donald Trump and Fox News. He would be the kind of person that Donald Trump would deride as a rhino, a Republican in name only. He's not somebody who's going to be a sycophant. He was somebody you'd expect to be very critical of Brian Kilmeade. And his response to Kilmeade's 30-second apology was he deserves praise for this. And I've heard several other commentators and news people say similar things. I was just watching CNN this morning, and that I forget his name. Oh, John Berman, I think it is, on CNN. He says, "Wow, Brian Kilmeade apologized. He that's really impressive. People usually don't apologize." Something like that. There's several problems with this. The first problem is this is not the kind of thing that's fixed by a simple apology. Imagine if Brian Kilmeade, if they were talking about problems with getting workers for some industry on Fox News, and Brian Kilmeade said, "Well, we could always enslave Black people again, like during the antebellum times." And then there's an outcry, and 2 days later he gives an apology like this. Would that make it okay? Of course not. You suggested off the cuff, but you suggested reinstituting slavery, putting Black people back into chains. You don't come back from that by way of a quick apology, because the very fact that you would think in a moment that such a suggestion could ever be appropriate, could ever be considered in civil society, tells us something very disturbing about who you are. And that's not solved by a simple apology. And if your response to the problem of unhoused people living in Washington, D.C. is, well, maybe you could just involuntarily euthanize all of them, uh, that's not addressed by a simple apology, because again, that tells us something horrifying about who you are. And that's not something that's solved quickly. And there seems to be, from people like Bill Kristol, which shocks me, honestly, a complete lack of awareness of how this indicts a person's character that they would ever think to make a suggestion like this. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say about this is I think this also tells us something about Donald Trump, because the way that people are reacting, like praising Brian Kilmeade for issuing what is really a pretty milquetoast apology. He's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I shouldn't have said that." That's pretty much how he approaches this apology. That tells us something about Donald Trump and his impact on society, because of course it's now, I think, 9 years, this coming October, 9 years since the Access Hollywood tape, where Trump, his apology for that tape was to say Bill Clinton was worse and to say it was locker room talk. Now, that was not an apology. So Trump didn't apologize really for a video in which he boasted about sexually assaulting women. And everybody just said, all the conservatives, all the evangelicals who profess to care about morality said, okay, we'll just vote for you anyway. And for the last 10 years, that has been Trump's modus operandi, which is never apologize and rather go back at people twice as hard. So he never apologized for his comments about John McCain, that he liked soldiers that weren't captured. He never apologized back in during the election for attacking Megyn Kelly when she asked hard questions at a presidential debate by saying, well, she was probably menstruating. There was blood coming out of her, whatever he said. He didn't apologize for mocking a New York Times reporter who is disabled. And that was all some of the things that happened 10 years ago. And that instituted a pattern that you don't apologize. So the fact that you now have somebody who advocates for involuntarily euthanizing entire vulnerable populations, and they can just pop on and make a 30-second YouTube a video posted on Twitter, and now it's all okay because that contrasts with Trump, who never apologizes. That shows how far society has decayed. That shows the corrosive impact of one personality, Donald Trump, on society. That you can be as vulgar and as wicked as you want. You can suggest killing people. Donald Trump himself said he could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and his cultic followers would still praise him, which of course is true. That means that Brian Kilmeade, he can get away with a pathetic apology like this after he just advocated for eugenic Nazi style policies. And even Bill Kristol from the Bulwark will say he deserves praise. That is how far American society has come in 10 years, thanks to Donald Trump.